The president brings a group of Democrats and Republicans together to reopen the country. I'm Basil John reporting in Washington, while lawmakers see this as a necessity.
I'm Raquel Martin in Washington. President Trump says he wants to try and reopen the economy as soon as possible. And he's asking a select group of congressional lawmakers to help pave the path forward. How they're weighing in, I'll have that full story coming up.
Congress is working with President Trump on a plan to reopen the economy. I'm Kelly Meyer reporting from Washington. What some lawmakers say needs to happen before anything opens back up.
I'm Trevor Shirley in Washington. What would it take to make sure every American could vote by mail this coming November? It's a debate lawmakers and health experts are having right now. I've got that story coming up.
Some Democrats in Congress say they're outraged by tax cuts for the rich that were buried in the coronavirus aid package. I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington, and I'll explain coming up.
From donor events and rallies to Zoom and phone calls with constituents. I'm Joe Khalil here in Washington. We're going to take a look at the way the pandemic has had an impact on campaigning, from the White House on down to each member of Congress.
Members of Congress have passed billions of dollars of coronavirus relief for the agriculture industry. Now they want to make sure fish farmers can stay afloat. I'm Jesse Tenor in Washington, and I'll have that story coming up.
Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey says President Trump's organization of a new task force dedicated to finding ways to reopen the country is the right step.
It's time to begin this process.
Toomey says serious social distancing did its job, but isn't a long-term solution.
The whole reason that we shut down our economy and made it really illegal for people to go to work was to prevent our hospitals from becoming overrun.
West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito says increased testing capabilities will make a big difference.
But what's really going to be, I think, useful to businesses and states and governors is going to be the antibody test, which would tell you whether you've developed an immunity.
Both Toomey and Capito believe if the U.S. doesn't act now, it will take years to recover from the outbreak. The president is recommending states follow a three-stage plan to reopen the country. But Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey doesn't want the president to rush back into normalcy.
That contentment that I think some people believe will happen once things are open will be wiped out in a matter of days if we don't do it the right way.
And Casey has a warning for the president.
Every word you say about this pandemic has to be truthful, has to be accurate, and has to be consistent. And if a politician can't do that, they should just shut up.
Casey hopes the members of the new task force find a balance between prioritizing health and the economy. Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
To overcome the economically crippling effects of the coronavirus pandemic, Senator Tom Tillis says North Carolina needs to look at reopening the state county by county.
It's on the other side of the curve where they've had relatively low incidences to start thinking about policies to safely get them back to work.
Tillis is on the president's bipartisan economic task force, assigned to get America back up and running.
It's a big state with 10 million people, and it's going to take time to get fully open.
But some of his constituents are losing patience, joining Facebook groups and outdoor protests during the stay-at-home orders, calling for elected officials to reopen businesses now. The White House says the country should reopen in phases, but to do that, each state needs to have sufficient testing.
Before we can reopen the economy, we must do more testing.
Democrat North Carolina Congressman G.K. Butterfield says the state is nowhere near the needed testing levels, especially in minority and rural communities. He says the testing will provide vital information about when it's okay to go back to work.
We've got to have the data. We must do the testing. It is our responsibility in Washington to provide the resources.
President Trump says testing is up to the states, but Butterfield hopes for more cooperation.
The federal government does have a role working with state government.
Butterfield hopes all sides can come up with an agreement to fund testing by early next week. Reporting in Washington, I'm Kelly Meyer.
We're starting rejuvenation.
President
Trump is launching a bipartisan task force to generate ideas for quickly reopening the economy.
You gotta look beyond this crisis.
Republicans appointed to the team, like Illinois Congressman Rodney Davis, say it's time to take action.
We ought to start thinking about areas we can open it.
He says while nearby Chicago remains a hotspot for the virus, the threat in communities like his is contained.
Taylorville, my hometown, has had 2 senior facilities overrun with COVID. And one of those facilities is off of quarantine right now. They showed what they can do and what we can do together to mitigate any further spreads.
Missouri Republican Josh Hawley says his top priority is getting people back to work.
There won't be an economy reopen if nobody has jobs to go back to.
But says the decision to reopen should be made closer to home.
Region by region.
But Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow, who wasn't invited on the task force, says a patchwork system could backfire.
The virus does not know county lines or state lines. We need to come together and have strong national leadership.
She says the federal government needs to drastically ramp up testing to avoid a second wave of infections.
We have to have testing in place before we can have people go back to work safely.
President Trump says he's working to get millions of more rapid response tests out to communities, but says ultimately testing is up to the states. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
Democrats asked the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation to take a closer look at the $2 trillion coronavirus aid package and discovered a tax break for the rich
that was snuck into this bill.
Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett and Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse asked for the review. They say Republican senators included the $195 billion tax break for the richest Americans. And Whitehouse says most Democrats had no idea
of how cynical and wrong in the midst of all this tragedy it is to try to pull off a stunt like this.
The provision allows tax breaks for the past 2 years before the pandemic struck.
They did great in the stock market last year, and they can offset their gains against paper losses.
Middle-class Americans got $1,200 stimulus checks. Congressman Doggett says Americans who make more than $1 million could get tax breaks of about $1.7 million each.
It is designed pure and simple for a few big real estate developers like Donald Trump.
I mean, revisionist history can be fun.
South Dakota Republican Congressman Dusty Johnson says every Democrat supported the aid package, and Democrats also got some of what they wanted.
For some of the tweaks to unemployment insurance, not my favorite, yes.
Doggett and Whitehouse plan to introduce a bill to try to repeal the tax breaks for the rich. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
The coronavirus has taken the 2020 presidential campaign off the road and online.
Well, it's been a huge shift from a campaign standpoint. We can't hold rallies.
Republican Party Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel says in a presidential election year, enthusiasm starts at the top of the ticket.
He is the best messenger.
But President Trump has had to trade packed arenas for the White House briefing room.
If the president weren't on TV right now, the American people would see wall-to-wall agenda media pushing back on him.
But there is more to the 2020 campaign. The Senate's in play for both parties, and control of the House may come down to a few key battleground districts in California.
Putting Kevin McCarthy in as Speaker as opposed to Nancy Pelosi, and it's going to run right through Orange County.
One of the races she's talking about, Democrat Harley Ruta's Orange County race, which is looking competitive. Ruta says Congress's response to the coronavirus will have a major impact.
Yeah, we're going to be evaluated on how we reacted to it.
Ruta says his campaign staff is checking in virtually on the elderly in his district. And the chairwoman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Sherry Bustos, says members of her caucus are taking similar steps nationwide.
Politics is about relationship building anyway, but this is all much more about checking in with people.
Bustos says the only campaign strategy that makes sense is to focus on the coronavirus and its impact 24/7. In Washington, I'm Joe Khalil.
Voting rights advocates say because of the coronavirus, every American should have the opportunity to vote by mail in November.
Our feeling is that no citizen should have to choose between their own safety and exercising their fundamental right to vote.
Nick Troiano with the nonpartisan political reform advocacy group Unite America says the clock is ticking.
We anticipate that states will need to take action sooner rather than later to put necessary preparations in place.
Ohio Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown wants Congress to take action to allow mail-in voting in all 50 states.
And every voter should be sent, at a minimum, an application. I think that every voter should be sent a ballot.
But many Republicans oppose mail-in voting, and President Trump has said he thinks voting by mail could lead to massive fraud.
This whole thing about massive voter fraud is a total myth.
But Republican National Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel backs the president.
There are lots of problems. They're very hard to find.
McDaniel says the federal government should let the states decide for themselves.
What we oppose is a nationalized mail-in voting system run by the federal government. Let it be administered by the states that have put safeguards in place.
Right now, 17 states have strict rules on who can vote by mail, but 33 others allow a mail-in ballot for anyone. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Without restaurants, cafeterias, and markets, fish farmers could soon go underwater.
It's really going to be a strain on the business.
That's what Louisiana Senator John Kennedy is hearing from crawfish growers who have lost the majority of their sales to the coronavirus crisis.
It's more than dollars and cents. It's more than arithmetic. It's a part of our culture. I can't imagine Louisiana without crawfish.
For Arkansas Senator John Bozeman, it's catfish.
About 60% of the fish they produce goes to restaurants and institutions. That business now is almost non-existent. So they've got lots of stock, no place to go with it.
Catfish and crawfish each bring in more than $300 million to the U.S. annual economy. Congress included $9.5 billion for all farmers in the latest round of coronavirus relief. Bozeman and Kennedy are urging the U.S. Department of Agriculture to make sure a portion of those funds goes to the aquaculture industry. Secretary Sonny Perdue says his department has been working to expedite the funding since President Trump signed the bill into law.
A lot of sectors affected, and we're trying to be as inclusive as we can be in listening to them and their requests and their needs.
Perdue is working with the White House to finalize a plan for direct payments to farmers. In the meantime, he says USDA is also working to channel the supply to a new customer, food banks.
And delivering it to people who need it.
In Washington, I'm Jessie Tenor.
So we got sick by the thousands, and some of us died. And many of us are still sick. We are still recovering from the trauma of this war. The dead patients we've seen, the impact on our families, the co-workers and loved ones that we've lost. And yet a profound insult has just gotten added to our numerous injuries.
What do we need? PPE. What do we want? Respect. What do we need? PPE. What do we want? Respect.
On Friday this past week, 7 days ago, our hospital system announced a new policy that threatened to take away some of our sick time. They want us to seek documentation for every time we are unable to come to work because of illness, whether it's physical or psychological. For starters, after all we've given to this fight, this is simply a brutal slap in the face for our efforts in this war. This is a dishonor to our collective sacrifice as public hospital nurses in the most deadly pandemic that we've had in this country in 100 years.
Let's respond to the president. First of all, if he's sitting home watching TV, maybe he should get up and go to work, right? So the projections were high. They were the president's projections. So for him to say to anyone, well, you relied on projections and the projections were wrong, they're your projections, Mr. President. And I don't need the President of the United States to read the Constitution for me. Maybe he should have read the Constitution before he said he had the power to open the states. He's saying he doesn't want to provide funding to the states, and he doesn't want to help on testing. And I can tell you the states can't do it otherwise. And if this testing doesn't work, that's a serious problem.
I don't think that anyone was prepared for this because there's so many more deaths out there and so many more sick people that are suffering. The suffering has increased. Calls that we receive, most of them are corona positive and most of them are suspected COVID positive. It's just not a regular stomach ache or arm pain or back pain. It's actual real life sicknesses. Go get some for me. I gotta put on my gown too. Could be COVID related. So now we gotta gown up. I'm gonna gown up in the back of the ambulance.
COVID.
All jobs is an adrenaline, so I'm just drained right now. I'm emotionally drained and physically drained and definitely mentally drained, you know. Since this happened, I haven't been able to sleep with the lights off. I sleep with my lights on. Things like this replay in my head, you know. You hear the cries, you just hear and you see everything all over again. This is when it's hard. It's real hard. So young kids, youngest boy is 3, and you can't do nothing. This is when you don't try to do it in front of the family and you take a time out and you do it on your own. You try to take the emotion with you, but you don't do it in front of the family. I'm always a sucker for this. I mean, this job takes a toll, but it's something that I love to do because it's reality. I think me, taking care of others is my calling. It has to be.
I applied for unemployment right away, went on the site. So it's still a couple days before the whole pandemic thing happened when we had, millions of unemployment claims now. I still haven't received any benefits yet, and it's been about a month. It's tough. I have a landlord that's very nice and has, eased his rent on me. I just got my stimulus check, luckily, but it's not even going to help that much because my rent is $750 a month. So $1,200, you can only live on it for about a month. It's a struggle. I feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, and I'm just trying to stay as focused and strong as I can.
I did get my stimulus check, but I was denied self-employment, so we have all been told to wait until I think April 24th when the the $600 stimulus comes in for the self-employed. So just been kind of living off of savings and my stimulus check right now. And so my boyfriend's still working, but my mom and my stepdad and my family's been helping us out a little bit, here, let me get you some dinner. I am worried about a recession. For my industry, it's, like now, it's not essential. So with people not having income coming in or, not making as much money or they lose their high paying jobs, what's the first thing to cut out? Beauty services.
I never thought that I'd be putting up an operation like this on the concourse. So when we won the World Series, I was out there having a good time like everyone, and it really makes something that's so powerful, really powerful in a different way.
We're packing boxes for people who need food and aren't able to go to the store and be able to purchase the food. It's really cool because there's no one here and they're using Wrigley Field is something that could be productive for society and in this time.
It's a tough time for a lot of people, and we've seen our need for food rise by about 140%. We pack about 1,200 boxes a day here. We really try and give them a holistic diet of things that they can take home to their family.
We've never seen anything like this, and to be completely shut down, to have to make so much of our staff stay home and shelter in place, to not be able to really do what we do best, which is engage with the visiting public. It's had a major financial impact, but it's also really just not who we are. We've had to, first of all, do a layoff of the part-time employees and the seasonal employees, the ones that are only here for when the visiting public's here.
The revenue from those visitors is the lifeblood of our member institutions. So with no visitors coming in, I mean, they're living off of their seed corn at this point.
Target.
The zoo or aquarium, they can't just send their employees home and turn off the lights and lock the doors. They have to care for animals.
You know, we're using protective measures. We're wearing masks if we're within 6 feet of each other, or, you know, many of our animals that are more sensitive and potentially able to get the COVID-19 disease. And of course, we're doing a lot more disinfecting, particularly of high-touch areas.
So our objective is to just make it to the point where they allow us to reopen for business, and the people can come and enjoy the animals.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say